And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7. RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Listening back to NASA's audio from the Artemis II launch this past April gives me chills. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so cool to realize we were here for that. We got to be here while people were going to the moon.
I know.
Yeah, and even getting to relive the audio since then of the mission is just so awesome. There was so much excitement leading up to the launch, and I just can't imagine how it felt for the people who were involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, preparation for this took many years, of course, but it felt like anticipation was building exponentially as the launch date of Artemis II approached, especially when that date was pushed back due to a liquid hydrogen leak that was detected during a dress rehearsal. But the launch being pushed back wasn't a bad sign. In fact, it was a good one. Sticking to the set timeline was important, but paled in comparison to the mission being safe. Since it was established on July 29, 1958, NASA has accomplished what humans could only dream about 100 years ago. And Artemis II was a massive success, but the lessons that have made NASA missions safer have sometimes come at a tremendous cost. And this year is the 40th anniversary of perhaps one of the best-known accidents in NASA's history, the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Welcome to Tiny Matters. I'm Sam Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host, Deboki Chakravarti. Deboki, neither of us was alive during the accident, but I do have this really strong memory of learning about it in school.
Yeah, I feel like the pictures are just kind of the thing that has stuck with me of just the explosion and everything. It's hard not to remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in today's episode, we're asking, what happened that caused the accident, both from a science and infrastructure standpoint? What was learned, and how has it changed the way we go to space today? We'll begin on the morning of the Challenger shuttle's launch, January 28, 1986, in Cape Canaveral, Florida. And at 11:37 a.m. Eastern, the astronauts were mere moments from liftoff.
This is a special report from Channel 4 News. Good morning, I'm Ken Shocknick, and Space Shuttle Challenger is just a few seconds away from blasting off from the Kennedy Space Center near Cape Canaveral, Florida. Let's take a look right now. Challenger finally getting ready to leave KSC. It's launch delayed a couple of times because of weather and mechanical problems.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
The solid rocket boosters kicking in.
The 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Things were appearing business as usual, but just 73 seconds in, the shuttle exploded.
4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
It's always amazing to hear how quickly the shuttle moves. It's already more than 4 miles downwind, as we just
Engines
heard.
throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
The shuttle mission will launch, my God.
1 minute 15
There's been an explosion.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
This is not standard. This is not something that is planned, of course. I can see a solid rocket booster has broken away from Shuttle Challenger. That's what you're looking at in the middle of your screen. I cannot see the shuttle itself. I don't know if it's able to continue on one rocket booster. If it's able to jettison that rocket booster, it will be able to return to the Kennedy Space Center. Perhaps. The shuttle engines are not enough to power the shuttle back down. It would have to shut down.
Looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
I hope they were able to survive. I hope the astronauts
We have no downlink.
We have absolutely no sign at all of the shuttle itself.
That day, all 7 people aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger were killed. Teacher in Space Payload Specialist Krista McAuliffe, Payload Specialist Gregory Jarvis, Mission Specialists Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Dick Scobie, Mission Commander Ronald McNair, and Pilot Mike Smith.
At the time, we didn't know what happened, but within a matter of weeks, it was determined that it was something that probably should have been prevented.
That's Terry Hart. Today, Terry is a professor at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, teaching aerospace engineering. But he's also an astronaut, and he flew on the Challenger less than 2 years before the disaster. He'd become close with many of the astronauts who died on January 28, 1986. The pilot on Terry's 1984 mission had been Dick Scobie, and Terry's best friend in the astronaut office was pilot Mike Smith. He'd also trained with Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Ronald McNair.
So I lost 5 good friends that morning. 2 days before, Dick called me actually to see how I was doing. I was ill at the time. I was still working, but I was going through some treatments, and he called me a couple days before to see how I was doing. He and Mike Smith had called me.
Terry grew up in the 1950s, an era where kids could finally start dreaming of actually going to space.
I was 11 years old growing up in Pittsburgh when Sputnik was launched. And I actually saw Sputnik come over Pittsburgh. It was in the paper that day that if you looked right after sunset, the sun was still shining on it. I saw it tumbling across the sky. And at that time, I'm not sure the word astronaut had been invented yet. So it wasn't the kind of thing that you thought about, for a career. But I was excited about aviation and all things aerospace related.
After high school, Terry completed a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Lehigh and then began a job with Bell Laboratories. But the following year, 1969, he took a 4-year absence to join the U.S. Air Force.
Then NASA started looking for the first group of space shuttle astronauts in the mid-'70s. And I thought, that would be kind of fun to be an astronaut. So at that point, I put an application in, really thinking that I might have enough background to go through some of the testing. But surely they're not going to pick me. And so it was kind of almost on a whim that I applied.
A casual NASA application.
Yeah, no big deal.
And of course, they did choose Terry. Fast forward a few more years, and Terry was selected to be one of the astronauts on the STS-41C mission, NASA's 11th Space Shuttle mission and the 5th mission with Space Shuttle Challenger.
The focus of the mission was to repair the Solar Max satellite, which was investigating solar flares, and to deploy the Long Duration Exposure Facility, or LDEF, into low Earth orbit so that it could study how different materials performed in space. Terry operated the Remote Manipulator System, a 50-foot-long robotic arm created to deploy, retrieve, and fix satellites in space. The STS-41C mission took place from April 6th to April 13th, 1984, and was considered a huge success. So a little less than 2 years later, on January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger was on the precipice of its 10th flight. The launch had already been pushed back a few times due to mechanical issues and bad weather. And even the day of, everything was delayed 2 hours when the hardware monitoring the shuttle's fire detection system failed. But at 11:38 a.m., it was time for liftoff. Less than 2 minutes later, the shuttle had disintegrated.
When the Challenger accident happened in 1986, I was a junior in high school, and I really vividly remember it. I was walking out of third period, headed toward fourth period, and I passed the school library, and there was a television playing it over and over and over, and we all just stood there in disbelief.
That's Nathan Vassberg, the acting chief of the Office of Safety and Mission Assurance at NASA headquarters. He joined NASA in 1995, many years after the disaster. But he told us that even to this day, NASA continues to study what went wrong so that the same mistakes aren't made again. So let's talk about that day.
When we were going to launch the Challenger, the temperatures in Florida were down in the near freezing range of temperatures. And our previous history with the shuttle was we'd never launched it below 53 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it was unusually cold in Cape Canaveral, Florida, just 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was a problem. So if you can imagine the Challenger shuttle or check out a photo, you see a big orange tank in the center and then 2 solid fuel rocket boosters flanking it.
There's a joint on those solid rocket motors with a big O-ring seal that goes around the whole diameter of it. And that O-ring seal was susceptible to getting brittle and not working well in cold temperatures. And in fact, we had some data of limited failures of that O-ring at 53 degrees, the coldest we'd ever launched. And so on the day of launch, when it was very close to freezing, there were engineers who thought it was a bad idea to launch in those cold temperatures. And over the course of a series of meetings that happened leading up to flight, those voices got squelched in the process. And so what went to the senior leaders at NASA who made the decision to launch was a watered-down version of the real story.
The night before the launch, there was a teleconference between NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and Morton Thiokol, the company that designed and manufactured the Space Shuttle's solid rocket boosters, which included those O-ring seals. At least 5 of the Morton Thiokol engineers voiced serious concerns about the launch, but they were overruled by company executives as well as NASA, with one of the NASA managers reportedly saying, quote, "My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?" And so things pressed ahead.
And about a minute and a half into flight, that O-ring failed and hot gases ejected out of the solid rocket booster into the main fuel tank and caused a massive explosion that resulted in the loss of the crew.
Photographs from the launch show that just 0.678 seconds after liftoff, there's a strong puff of gray smoke around the right solid rocket booster, which we now know is an indicator that the rocket boosters were not completely sealed. And you know how Nathan just mentioned that going into the disaster, they had some data of the O-ring failing at 53 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest launch to date? That was, in fact, Terry's launch.
We lifted off on a fairly cold morning there in April, and we found out after the Challenger was lost that our solid rocket boosters, when they came back, the first set of seals had failed on my mission. We didn't know that. that was never shared.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying. And also must just be, I guess, beyond disconcerting, like upsetting in a different way, because you've also just lost your friends to something that now you realize really could have been your fate as well.
Right. It must be so weird to be like, that's data from my launch.
Yeah. So as I was researching this episode, I learned that not only is the Challenger disaster something that NASA still learns from, but it's a common ethics case study in classrooms across the country. Vanessa Bentley is a professor at the University of Central Oklahoma and teaches a number of courses on applied ethics, particularly in the sciences. In her engineering ethics course, she covers some of the problems an engineer could face in the real world, as well as moral theories, frameworks that would help someone evaluate a moral dilemma and determine if something is right or wrong.
So, whistleblowing, privacy, risk analysis, cost-benefit analysis, accessibility and inclusion, sustainability, things like that. So that's kind of preparing future engineers with the tool that they'll need down the road.
In the course, Vanessa dissects the conflict between managers and engineers that led to the Challenger disaster.
So what are the responsibilities of the managers? They're interested in the good of the organization. They're interested in timelines, budget, getting things to happen on time. And in this case, the engineers are interested in designing good technology, that is job, that is safe and effective, that's been well tested, and things like that. And then those two interests conflict. And that is kind of what the Challenger case study really shows, is a conflict between the expertise and the managers pushing and not listening to the expertise of the engineers.
Vanessa also homes in on the fact that the faulty O-ring seal was a known issue for many years, since 1981. There was talk of fixing it, but ultimately people kept plugging along, more or less accepting it as a thing that needs to be updated, but is good enough.
This is where the normalization of deviance comes in, where even though these joints weren't designed to allow O-ring erosion to happen, the various parties said, this is still okay, it's still safe as designed, so we'll keep using it. So it didn't become anomalous anymore, but began to be possibly expected.
The term normalization of deviance was coined by sociologist Diane Vaughan during her analysis of the decision processes that led to the Challenger disaster. Essentially, the organizational culture at NASA led to repeated acceptance of the flawed O-rings, which, over time, lowered safety standards.
And the way she talks about it is the tendency to consider behavior that varies from either design or good engineering practice as acceptable. Another way of putting it is from the textbook that I use, the process in which a technical error is accepted as normal, even though the technological system is not working as it should. So Vaughan, as a sociologist, was looking at the decision-making processes of the organization. And she talks about this long process by which decisions get made, small ones, but those small ones end up changing everyone's kind of moral compass and what they consider to be normal and what kinds of things they allow, and allowing a little bit more wiggle room.
Unfortunately, even with analyses of what went wrong on both a scientific and organizational level, NASA's safety culture was slow to change. And in 2003, there was another disaster, this time the Space Shuttle Columbia.
It happens to be another case of the normalization of deviance.
The Columbia STS-107 mission lifted off on January 16, 2003. During the launch, falling foam from the external tank hit the carbon panels on the underside of the left wing.
And foam shedding was something that had happened on previous flights, so they didn't think that it was going to be a problem in this flight.
This damage caused the wing to melt on re-entry, destroying the shuttle and killing another 7 astronauts just 16 minutes before Columbia was scheduled to touch down. Those astronauts were Mission Commander Rick Husband, Pilot William McCool, Mission Specialist Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, and Michael Anderson, and Payload Specialist Elon Ramon.
So it's really powerful to have to contend with the fact that your friends didn't make it back. I wasn't directly involved in the Columbia flight, although I was at NASA and I was working on the space station program at the time. I did know 2 of the crew members, Rick Husband and Laurel Clark, very well. And so one of the things that we changed after Columbia is we even further took the safety and mission assurance organization outside of the program so that we had an independent voice and we could bring up those things even more than after Challenger. And I look at where we are now in a culture, and I think we've actually learned how to do it right. And yet we still make mistakes. But at least when we make mistakes, we are able to talk about them and have an open discussion about the risk and what risk we're taking.
So what does it look like to apply these lessons to current day missions? Well, let's look at Artemis. In May 2019, NASA announced the new program that would bring humans back to the moon to, quote, explore more of the moon for scientific discovery, economic benefits, and to build on our foundation for the first crewed missions to Mars. Artemis I, completed in 2022, was an uncrewed flight test of the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System rocket traveling around the moon. And on April 3, 2023, the names of the 4 astronauts chosen for the Artemis II mission were announced: Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen. And 3 years later, they made history, touching back down on April 10, 2026, following a 10-day flight around the moon.
For the first 20 years of Nathan Vassberg's career, he worked on the International Space Station and got to see it designed, built, and of course, flown, which must have just been amazing. After that, he worked with SpaceX and Boeing for over a decade to develop vehicles to get crews to and from the space station. And then more recently, he became acting chief of safety and mission assurance during Artemis II.
In that role, I had a team that was looking over the design and the architecture and the building of all of the elements of Artemis that led us to the Artemis II mission just about a month ago. If you're engineering or designing something, you want to know how it works. How is it going to work? And in safety, you kind of flip that around and go, how is it going to break? And then what do we do when things break?
And as you can imagine, there are a million details to keep track of, including some pretty key aspects of the mission. For example, for Artemis II, because it was going to be a mission that was manned as opposed to Artemis I, the team tested the life support system in Earth orbit for about 24 hours before NASA committed to going around the moon. But Nathan said the high energy periods of the mission are probably the most risky.
And so the first really dangerous part of the mission is right when we launch. You're putting millions of pounds of thrust through the rocket, up through the capsule, and accelerating it out of the atmosphere. And so anytime you have high energy states like that, you incur a lot of risk. The other one is you've got to bring them home safely. And so when we're bringing crews back either from the International Space Station or from lunar orbit, you have to dissipate a lot of energy to slow the capsule down as it re-enters the atmosphere. And so things like the heat shield become really critically important, and it has to work flawlessly. And then as you get a little closer to Earth, one of my most tense moments is always when the parachutes start to open, because you have to slow that capsule down in order to land softly enough on the ocean that the crew survives. And thankfully for Artemis II, all of those systems worked extremely well.
Related to safety on reentry, I bet some listeners will remember seeing this on social media. Leading up to the launch, there were a lot of discussions surrounding the heat shield and if it would hold.
It was in the news right before we launched, and I think it was appropriate to have it in the news. What had happened is on Artemis I, when we did the reentry, the heat shield performed well, but it lost some pieces of material that we did not expect it to lose. So we had some of the heat shield actually came off during reentry. And so anytime that happens and you don't expect it, we have to really understand what's going on and why that happened. And we have to anchor that all in physics. And so as we moved from Artemis I to Artemis II, we spent an inordinate amount of time looking at the heat shield design, doing testing on the ground to the best of our ability. And then we even changed the reentry profile to be more benign in order to make sure that the heat shield didn't have that same occurrence on Artemis II.
And how do you define a more benign entry, just for someone who doesn't know what a typical entry is?
So on Artemis I, we did what's called a skip reentry, where we came into the atmosphere a little bit, and then we kind of went back up, and then we came in a second time. So we had two peak heating events. For Artemis II, we didn't use a skip reentry. We used a direct reentry that would limit the heat loads, and then we didn't have the two peaks in the heat load as well. And the two peaks was part of the reason that we had the material come off on Artemis I.
They also tested out pieces of the heat shield in a facility called the ArcJet Complex, injecting heat right onto the heat shield and seeing how it reacted. All of their preparation paid off. They saw the heat shield after the mission, and it was pristine. But Nathan is glad that people voiced their concerns leading up to the mission. That's a sign of a healthy safety culture.
When people feel entitled to speak up if they have concerns, and then we can address those concerns, that's what we want. We want to be able to think through the process, and if somebody has questions, we want to make sure we have solid technical answers for that.
Okay, so we all know that the Artemis II mission was awesome.
It was.
But also, I am so glad that I was not the person in charge of safety. I would have been so stressed out.
Yeah. Oh, no. My brain couldn't have managed that.
It was 10 of the most stressful days of my life. Really, I think I aged a year during those 10 days. But I'll take you back to, I was sitting in Florida on a console watching data for the launch. And as a safety person in that environment, you just have to wonder, did we miss anything? Did we get everything right? Did we do all we could to buy down the risk? And so as soon as it comes off the pad, you watch it go up and you're in awe and you're just holding your breath. And then once the booster comes off and the capsule is flying free of the booster, you're a little bit relaxed. And then all of us scrambled to get back to Houston, where the mission control system is for the rest of the mission. And in the Mission Control Center here at the Johnson Space Center, it was a buzz. We were all in there from, 7 in the morning till 10 at night, at least, working these little issues, and then a little bit bigger issue would come up, and we're running around having technical discussions, and engineers are running off to do the things.
Fortunately, those issues ended up being quite minor. For instance, there was a problem with the toilet valve that was a relatively easy fix, and also the drinking water system, but they had other ways to get water out of the tanks for the crew to drink.
All the little things that went wrong, we look at those and we study them. The thing that I'm always trying to focus on is we testing on the ground like we fly? And if we are, then those little things normally don't get us. What we find very often is the things that get us are where we didn't anchor a model with physics, or we didn't simulate just right on the ground. And so I'm always looking for those kind of things. And the couple of failures that I mentioned on Artemis II are just prime examples of really subtle details that get you. One thing about the mission that surprised some of us, all of us who work on it day in and day out, we expect it to be excited and energetic about it. What I think really surprised people is how it captured the world. How flying these 4 crew, and these are really special people, flying them around the moon, and how they invited us into the capsule with them, how they talked about what they were feeling and what they were seeing, and really the whole world rallied around them. And then they're introspective about the planet Earth and the fact that we all live here together and we're one group of people on the planet really impressed me. And I just think it's worth thinking about what missions like this can do for not just NASA, not just the USA, but for the world. And so I'm excited to see the next missions come soon, and I'm hoping they do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something really, really special about this. And I do think that you couldn't have had a better group of 4 astronauts to be on the mission. Just their dynamic, their relationship with each other, the fact that they were so open and so human about everything. They're just such likable people. I think sometimes in the sciences or in this world, people don't always seem as human in a way. And I think that they brought this sense of humbleness and humanity, even though they're all 4 are wildly accomplished individuals. They felt accessible, and they felt like someone you would actually want to sit and have a conversation with, even if you knew nothing about space. And that to me was really special.
I think you nailed it. And they're not just acting when they act that way. I mean, that is exactly who they are as people. That's exactly who they are as a crew. And I mean, they just worked so amazingly well together. Whoever selected them did a really excellent job of putting 4 amazing people together to represent us all.
Going back to the moon is an unbelievably exciting scientific achievement, but it's so much more than that.
Something happens when you leave and go out to the moon and look back and see the entire Earth floating in space. That's a different image, and it really does change the way people think. That we understand the planet's perishable. We have to take care of it. We have to take care of each other. You don't see international borders from space at all. So that I think maybe 200 years from now, when historians are looking back on our time, they may well decide the best thing that came out of the space program were those photographs, starting in 1968 with the Earthrise, and then of course the technology today allows us to see with much more clarity, the Earth at a distance. That image really does change the way people think.
Okay, Deboki, tiny show and tell time.
It is that time.
Do you have something that's related to this? Because mine is completely unrelated to this topic.
Me too.
Okay. You want me to go? I'll go.
Yeah, I feel like you have the energy of someone who wants to go.
Okay.
You're like, I didn't mean to, but...
Thank you, but also should I be offended?
I feel like we both had the energy of like the kid who was always raising their hand in class, so I don't know why I'm acting like this is you.
Yeah, we do. I got teased for that. And you know what? It paid off, man.
Right. Yeah. If you know the answer, you gotta let them know the answer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. All right, so Deboki, I'm going to take a real left turn here, and I'm going to tell you an interesting tidbit about biting flies that feed on blood.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So they're called deerkeds. I never heard that term before. Yeah. And thankfully, they mostly go after deer and elk, but sometimes they bite humans. So they will fly around looking for hosts, and once they land, they will shed their wings. And in the press release I found, they'd written that this fly, quote, spends the remainder of its life moving through fur and feeding on blood, which is just the grossest image ever. I got the weird, like, I feel icky feeling. I need a bath. I need to take a shower. Yeah. So as adults, they fly around and they use their vision, it appears, to search for a suitable host. Most often that's a deer, obviously, but sometimes other mammals and occasionally a human. So what scientists have now found is that once this fly lands, they already knew it shed its wings, but actually the activity of its opsin genes are reduced to around half of what they were. So opsin genes code for opsin proteins. They're really important for vision, pupil reflexes, other eye things. And so these flies are not completely losing their vision, but it's likely super reduced.
Interesting.
And so the researchers think that this is a case of them sacrificing their sight to conserve energy for digestion and reproduction. And the reason that I'm bringing this weird little factoid to you today is because I always think it's really interesting, this sort of balance that happens sometimes. It happens in people as well, but I think about it more in nature, where you have certain species that will like give up some sense or ability in order to essentially perpetuate the species.
Right.
Like, I think about the most extreme example of this, I want to say, are praying mantises, because it's like do I breed and get killed, or do I just like carry on with my life, right? Like, I don't know if it's all species, but I know that the female praying mantis does rip off or bite off the heads of the male in at least some. So, so I don't know. I think that I always think it's fascinating sort of seeing how resources are managed in nature.
Right.
Yeah.
I almost like want to change my tiny show and tell now just to tell you about this cool thing I learned that and it was because someone was asking this question that seemed so obvious, but when I saw it, I was like, I didn't know, I don't know the answer, which is like, how do caterpillars go from goo to butterfly?
Oh.
And there are these things called imaginal discs, which are just like little bits of cells that are like part of their bodies. And so then basically they like dissolve, but those little bits of cells stick around, and those bits of cells like carry the plans for different parts of their body going forward. So like it's not just the butterfly, it's also Drosophila. It's a lot of insects that are going through this metamorphosis. They carry those little bits of like plant. And so you have different imaginal discs for different body parts, and they're just like feeding on that goo to be able to make those new body parts. And I can't get over that.
Yeah, no, I did know this because I feel like I was trending toward Evo Devo and like developmental biology. And so I did know about imaginal discs. They are really cool. I feel like it's like a fascinating way of studying body plan too, like in species. So yeah, no, it is really cool. Imaginal discs are very cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here. You knew more about it, because I was just like, I had never thought about this, and then it just completely blew my mind, and I was like, of course, this makes sense. But it's just crazy to think about. Like what you were talking about reminded me about that, because it's like that same like kind of broader thing of like losing massive parts of your body as part of like your cycle, as part of your life cycle, as part of the way that your species works, is like you need to actually get rid of huge parts of yourself. And that's just wild.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we had to like shed some weird layer or something before we had a baby, or like, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. So my actual tiny show and tell that I could also share is about this neat technology that I was reading about, which is an wearable ultrasound patch for continuous monitoring of the womb. So things like blood flow and heart rate. So scientists have been developing this. It's called U-Patch. It's still really like proof of concept, but they have like actually tried this out on pregnant people. And so they've been able to get like good measurements, at least compared to like standard ultrasound devices. And they also, there was one case that they reported where they were able to find a case of a severe intrauterine growth restriction, which led to a C-section to prevent stillbirth. So the idea is like this technology could, like maybe if it worked, and could be like scaled up, could be a way to help prevent stillbirths. And so it's like, yeah, what you were saying was just making me think about that, because there is like, we maybe are not shedding huge parts of our body in the same way, but there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Like as part of that.
Yeah.
So in some ways we are doing that as well. Like you are making a whole new organ to feed this baby and
then shedding it.
Yeah. And getting rid of it.
That's true. That's our version of an imaginal disc.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically.
Well, that was kind of a 3 for Tiny Show and Tell. There you go.
Yep. We're packing them all in.
We are.
Well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Tiny Matters, a podcast brought to you by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude. This week's script was written by Sam, who is also our exec producer, and edited by Michael David and by me, Deboki Chakravarti. It was fact-checked by Michelle Boucher. Our audio engineer is Misha Stanton. The Tiny Matters theme is by Michael Simonelli and the Charts and Leisure team.
Thanks so much to Vanessa Bentley, Terry Hart, and Nathan Vassberg for joining us. Go rate and review us wherever you listen. We super duper appreciate it. Also, if you have an episode idea, feedback, whatever it may be, you can email us, tinymatters@acs.org. And we'll see you next time.